I'll admit this might be a little biased. Halo 3 ODST was the first game I ever played in the Halo franchise, and is one of the first 3 games I bought for my Xbox 360, and for this reason I'm trying as hard as I can not to call this a review, because up until about last year I hadn't actually played Halo 1 even. I played, I think, Halo 4 and that's it. But I genuinely believe that this is the best Halo game. For those of you who don't know, in Halo 3 ODST you do not play as the main character of the other Halo games, a Master Chief. In fact, you don't even play as one of those big beefy Spartan soldiers. You actually play as an ODST soldier, who is more comparable to like a normal foot soldier or something. This is one of the big reasons I fucking love this game, because you are not some unstoppable god. You are another soldier, and the game genuinely feels like you are just another person in a war zone. A very large portion of the game takes place in this kind of overworld area in the city of New Mombasa, where the game in itself is set completely. And the main aspect of the game is you going out of your way to try and find the rest of your squad who you've been separated from. So in the main game you're roaming around looking for these different clues as to the rest of your squad's whereabouts. When you find these clues you get to play a small level where you play as the character based on the clue you found, or it's some way related to the clue you found. I find that these action-packed segments where you play as the other characters of the squad are much more reminiscent of the original Halo games, or the more action-packed Halo games, but I'll go into more detail about that in a second. But this whole aspect of being alone in this kind of abandoned city is just, honestly, is such an emotional experience. And I know emotion is something you usually link to Halo, and that's probably why I like this one so much, because I haven't felt anything with like a different Halo. I don't get like an emotional response from smashing up a bunch of skulls. I get an emotional response from feeling like you are abandoned and alone. And nothing helps bring home this feeling of loneliness than the soundtrack. The soundtrack for this game is fucking insane. Like, genuinely, I listen to this stuff to go to sleep, I listen to this stuff to hype myself up. It is an insane soundtrack, and I know other people will have more fond memories of Halo 3's soundtrack, but I think they're in two very different ballparks. Now, some of you might be saying the reasons why Halo 1 through 5 were so popular is because they were action-filled games. They were full of action sequences that were cool and badass, and you felt like a badass character. But I think that the reason that this game does so well is because it still has sequences like that. It just doesn't focus on them 100%. Which brings me back to the missions where you play as your lost squad mates. These missions are far more similar to older Halo titles, where you play as Master Chief by himself, but the reason they are so good is because you still feel like a soldier. You don't feel like a super soldier, you feel like a scared, helpless soldier in amongst other equally as scared and equally as helpless soldiers. And I fucking love games that do this. I love games that make you feel like you're just another soul thrown into the mercy of war, like Titanfall 2. That game, honestly, it just makes you feel like you are not even supposed to be there. It makes you feel like you've overcome everything personally, and honestly, it's such a good game. But essentially, if you boil it down, the reason I like this game so much is because it isn't standard Halo. It deviates from what has kind of been set as a Halo game. All these kind of formulas, all these kind of things that happen in all the other Halo games happen to some degree in this one, but kind of in like a watered down way alongside other stuff. The whole idea of being a one-man army, which honestly Halo kind of coined, it's kind of the game that started that. I feel like at this point it's kind of really overdone, and changing out for something where you feel like a lonely soldier is genius, frankly, and I think it is such a good way to mix up your game series. Honestly, it's genius. Experiencing the game world and exactly what was happening to you as a different character, as a character who can deal with this stuff much more easily, but dealing with it as a character who's weaker, like in mind, like in actual physical strength, is just such a good way to get a different perspective of the game world. Which I think is another reason why people loved Halo Reach so much, because you weren't playing as the guy who wins every time, you actually played as the guys who lost. You lost that first fight, and it's kind of this start of the whole series, and you're seeing it from someone else's perspective, and that honestly is so refreshing. And that's the key here, refreshing different is exactly what Halo needs every now and then. Like, the normal games can exist and go on, and they're still good. They're still fun. Like, I enjoy Halo 1, 2, and 3. I haven't played Halo 4 in a really long time, admittedly, but still probably okay-ish. But those kind of refreshing games in between are exactly what we need. Which is why I think we didn't really need Halo Infinite yet. Halo Infinite could have waited a couple of years, probably. I think what we needed was Halo the Grunt story or something like that. That would have been great. I would have fucking loved it. Imagine playing from the perspective of a grunt. That would be amazing. I'd love that. Think like the Arbiter or something. Just a shit ton weaker. Just pathetic. Again, I'm not saying that Halo Infinite isn't probably going to be good. If anything, the fact that it has an open world is probably going to be good. Like, think about it this way. If you were at a buffet and you ate 10,000 spring rolls, you kind of get a little bit bored. So maybe instead of having 10,000 spring rolls, you have 9,998 spring rolls and maybe like 2 pork dumplings, you know, just to mix it up every now and then. I'm sure you'd appreciate the spring rolls a lot more if you also had a couple of pork dumplings under your belt. All this talk about Chinese food is making me very hungry, so I'm going to stop the video and go and eat some Chinese food.